Okay, let's hear what you got. No, don't like that. That's better. I like that. That's the one.
Welcome to episode 1 of Chats. Today we're talking about change. I'm Corbin.
And I'm Sarah. Yeah, so we want to start off with the idea of what change is. The definition of change is alter, vary, modify, mean to make or become different, often amounting to a loss of original identity or substitution of one thing for another, which I think is a pretty interesting topic to jump into.
Yes, that's a strong definition.
It is a strong definition. So a lot of people fear change when that comes up in their lives, if it's something that's going to be different or foreign or they don't know the outcome. People like comfortable, they like predictable, they like to know what's going to happen. And the problem with life is...
You don't.
And it's always going to change. So I wanted to share maybe an example of change that happened in my life. Actually, a change upon change upon change. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's why for me, it's not as big an issue for me to deal with change, because I've had times in my life when I've had a lot of change hit me all at once.
And for some people like you, where it's like a lot of big changes, sometimes for people it's one huge change.
Yeah, like change looks like different things to different people. Yeah. For me, I would have to say that the biggest change in my life started around 2010. It was November 2010. We had just moved into the house that we're living in currently. It was very exciting because it was a property that we were looking forward to living in, and you guys were excited about it. We were excited about it. And then once we moved into this house, within 2 months, I was laid off my job, mm-hmm. which was very frustrating. Anyone who's been in that position knows how upsetting and the upheaval of it can be really difficult. So, of course, losing your job, big change there. I then had to move into a way to make income that was very different from what I'd been used to. I'd always had like the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, reliable income, reliable job. I had to move into freelancing, which was very different. Yeah. It's a very different pace of trying to make a living, and especially when you're trying to support a family and a brand new house, there's a lot of pressure there. So fast forward from that into the spring of 2011, we had some family stuff going on, but primarily we had a couple of family members that were really sick, yeah. And specifically my dad, who had cancer. It got a lot more serious right around that time. So basically from 2011 through to his passing in 2014 was a series of changes. Yeah. Everything from how my job was different and how that job allowed me to be more available to my parents, and what that looked like as being a mom to my kids, and how we were able to just keep things going with a constant state of change, because my dad had surgeries, he had treatments, there was a lot of running back and forth to doctor's appointments. That was a big change. And then in 2014, he passed, and huge change, the loss of a parent, regardless of what age you are. I don't think it
doesn't matter.
I don't think you have to be a young person or an older person. It doesn't matter. That relationship with a parent, it's that way for your whole life. So when my dad passed, that was a tremendous change. It didn't just change for me not having a dad. It changed my relationship with my mom. Mm. It changed my relationship with my sister. The last couple of months of his life, the information that he and I shared and the experiences that we shared changed how I looked at basically his life, because we were able to have conversations about things that I didn't know about before. So I thought that was pretty interesting to be able to look at things with a different lens.
Yeah.
Again, this isn't the greatest type of change, obviously, but it certainly was an interesting, it was a good change because I felt like I actually saw things more accurately.
Yeah.
So then, of course, my dad was gone, oh gosh, not a week. And I was given the opportunity to be in a job that I really enjoy and, went through the interview process and all of that. So within a span of 3 years, lost a job, gained a job, really struggled to keep things going in between those two times, and that constant change of freelancing and trying to make sure that there was financial support for the house. And then the idea of this family dynamic shift that is still in place now. I mean, when I look at where things were before my dad passed and where they are now, it's really a quantum shift in what the family looked like and what it currently is.
Yeah. And that's just listening to that. It made me think of something where change can hit you like a sniper rifle, where it's like direct, hits just you, or it can be a shotgun blast and it can spread.
And I actually feel like this frame of my life was the shotgun blast. It felt like every single aspect of my world was different, whether it was personally or professionally, and how I looked at things changed. So it wasn't just things happening to me, it was a personal change. So that's a really good observation, because that's exactly how it felt. So for people to say, well, change is everything you just said, that's pretty negative. Yes, it was a pretty negative time, but I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people around me, and I think, we all have our time. We're going to get into death and grieving another time, but I think to sit there and say, do I wish that I hadn't lost my job? Well, I ended up in a much better job. Yeah. And I ended up with a real skill set in between that was freaking hard at the time, but it gave me a different resiliency that I now have. Yeah. And do I wish my dad was still here? Absolutely. But I would not want him to continue in the condition he was in. So if I have to let him go so that he was not going to suffer, I am okay with that. Yeah. I can make peace with that. So yeah, I can understand why some people look at change and say, too much, I can't deal with it.
And too long, maybe, because that's not a couple weeks, that's a couple years of change.
Yeah.
And some people just feel like, well, it's a question mark how long it will be, and that maybe is what the uncertainty is what scares people, I think.
And maybe that's why it happened to me, because I do enjoy change. This is like the worst type of change. Yeah. But I do enjoy things being fresh and keeping it moving, and I don't like to be stagnant. I don't want to be in the same spot. I want to learn new things. I want to do new things. But to have all that come at once, maybe because I do kind of draw change like that, maybe that's why everything happened. Yeah. All at the same time. And then while all that was happening, we actually had other family members that were also dealing with significant health matters. So I don't want to get into too much about that. That's not my information to share. But it was a hard time. Yeah. I know you remember.
I remember a bit of it, yeah.
Yeah. But so yeah, I can understand why people resist change or maybe don't understand why change has to happen. I kind of have a little more developed appreciation for change. And I think change can be good. Like I say, I've given some pretty negative examples of change, but I also think change it brings about good things. But I don't want to talk about me the whole time. Yeah. I know you've got a really good example of change that's actually happened fairly recently. Yeah. So why don't you share that?
Yeah. So I went for a leap year at high school, and then summertime, worked my butt off, got money, went off to college in the fall.
This past fall?
Just this past fall. And around 3 weeks in.
Not even.
2 weeks in or so, I had this epiphany that at like 6 o'clock where my mind was going a million different ways and miles per hour. And I kind of had this realization that what I was going in for was not what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was misinformed about the course because we did lots of research and all that.
I was going to say, to be clear, we didn't go in blind to this.
No.
We did all the research. We went into the open house and everything. So
Yeah. And
once you got into it, it wasn't what you expected.
Yeah, we covered all the bases, and still, someone got home when we covered all the bases. But it was tough because, change. When I was talking to you on the phone from college, trying to make this decision, I knew I just had a pretty big change in my life.
Well, I was going to say, before we get to the decision, let's back up, because I think people forget what it's like to leave home.
Yeah.
You spent the summer preparing to go to college.
Yeah. Yeah, I was, and I've been away from home before, so like being away from home at college, first couple days, concerning for sure, but once I got into the motion of it, I was fine. I was making friends, getting used to the rooms and all that.
Yeah, you had your own routine when you were down there.
Yeah, had to switch rooms, which is another change within the change, just because of stuff going on in the room. But it was just a little crazy those 2 weeks, because on one hand I enjoyed this change and it was a good positive change, but on the other hand it was a negative change for me, finding
you
out.
were excited going.
Yeah, and being
there was great.
But there's positive and negatives to everything, but there's a certain point when the negatives outweigh the positives, and some kids, they drop out because it's too hard, or because they're failing halfway through their second year or something like that. I would have regretted the change if I did it because of those reasons. But as we discussed on our own, I didn't choose the change to leave and leave the program and leave the school for a bit because of those reasons. I did it.
You weren't homesick or missing your girlfriend or any of that stuff. No. It was a case of you felt like you were in the wrong lane.
Yeah, and I didn't regret it at all. And that's one thing about change, is that sometimes people regret the change. And just how you were talking about that, you don't regret, the things that happened to you because you learned from them. But I think I would have regretted if I stayed there, because I wouldn't be listening to myself. I wouldn't be learning from myself,
And that's a big thing, because I think people fear making a change. Like what you did was a big decision, and you said you didn't want to get to the point where you felt you would fail. And that's not fear of failure. That's because you
failing yourself.
Failing yourself. Yeah. Thank you for that. But to make the right decision for you. And some people, I think, are afraid of making that change because it's hard.
It's the norm. It's going against the norm, because there is that.
Make it work.
Yeah, because there is that stereotype I'm doing finger quotes. Stereotype of people dropping out because they want to party all the time, or people dropping out because they're not strong in that in the schooling type area. They'd rather
disciplines.
Yeah. And that, to be honest, it makes it hard sometimes right now for telling certain people about where I'm at right now, because there is that stigma, that stereotype around, I dropped out of college,
Yeah.
But as I said, I don't regret it at all. And for the most part, I'm open with talking to people about it, because a lot of people, some get stuck in these expensive and very long schooling opportunities, and then they come out of it, or before they even come out of it, and they've already dumped thousands of dollars into it. They realize that that's not what they want to do, right? And but they do it because it's the norm. It's what is expected of them, right?
Well, and to be fair, like when we had the conversation about you leaving school, we had a discussion about what life would look like when you came back home. Yep. So it wasn't like you were letting yourself off the hook and you were just going to sit at home and eat bonbons and watch Marvel movies. No. Like it was definitely, there's an expectation, and you were committed to that. And then to look forward and say, well, what do I want to do? So there's another change to come back home and refocus yourself and try to decide, and how's that gone?
Yeah. So far, it's been well. I've stuck to the game plan that we talked about. You know, it wasn't going to be sit at home all day. It has been like go with figuring out stuff about my future and stuff like that. I would say it's going well. It's a little more like I got lucky being able to get out of it the first time.
Yeah.
I don't want to make that same mistake again. Not mistake, but that I don't want to make that decision again.
You don't want to have to travel that road again.
No. I've done it once and I learned from it, but I don't want to go down again.
That's just fair comment.
Yeah, and so it's making the process of looking at stuff a little more difficult, I find. Also, the fact that we thought, after all the research, after all the stuff we went through, and to find out that, you know...
It wasn't what we thought it was.
It wasn't what we thought. It kind of gives me not a shadow of a doubt type thing, but just a little skepticism when I'm looking at these programs and, you know, all the things they're talking about, which is, ooh, I like that. But on the other hand, it's like, I'm getting deja vu from a year ago.
You like the course that you were going to this past fall.
Yes.
You were excited about that. So you're that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're afraid you're going to feel that same way and maybe feel let down again.
Yeah. So looking at it now, I think this has been a good change. And I think you said that too, of me coming back and, you know, recentering. Plus, on top of that, before I even went to school, I had to change. I broke my toe. So it's still healing. So there's just been a lot of change. Not as much as 3 years or so.
Oh, no.
But
we're not trying to compare that.
No.
But that's a significant change.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good point to bring up, that right now you're waiting for that clearance from a doctor because you've got a job lined up. So there's another change.
It's just lots of change going on. And I'm fine with it all. I'm kind of like you, where I'm fine with change.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't had too much negative change in my life, which helps. But the positive change, or being able to look at the silver lining of change, which a lot of people sometimes don't think about before or during a change, I think drastically helps the outcome.
And I know when you were little, how we would deal with communicating any big change that was coming, whether it was something... Well, actually,
moving houses.
Like the good example would be, you know, how you reacted to something as simple as when we said we were going to go to Disney.
Yeah.
We didn't want to tell you guys too early because we didn't want the 4 days of when are we going? Yeah. So we thought we would leave it right until we were literally getting the van packed to go to the airport.
Yeah.
And then we would tell you on the way to the airport. We thought that's the best way to handle it, to minimize the drama. What happened in that scenario?
Honestly, I forget that scenario.
Oh, you forget that? Okay.
But I remember when you told us. I remember when you told us on Christmas. And
we said it was coming and that we wouldn't tell you the date.
Which on one hand made young me very upset. I wanted to know. Because I'm like my dad, where I like to know what's going on. I like to know where the plane's headed. But enlighten me on what happened.
So what happened was, so you were like 4 at the time, 4 or 5, and we were in the van, and as soon as we said today's the day, like we picked them up at school, we brought them home and said,
I remember that day.
And you instantly got sick.
Yeah.
You felt nauseous all the way to the hotel. You were sick the whole night at the hotel. You were not well on the airplane. So that, I think, the reason I bring that up, not to make you feel, he's blushing right now.
I remember, because you just turned the key into my brain and unlocked that memory. I remember that because I believe you bought me the movie Cars. I was really big into that movie, and you bought me those cars, and you're like, and I was like, sweet, I got some toys because I love toys.
Right.
And they're like, we're going to Disney. And I think at that moment, Corbin shut down for a while. He needed to update.
Corbin just blacked out. But that was the thing. So in that moment, I realized, okay, we mishandled this. This is too much for him. This is a change that's overwhelming. So basically from that time forward, whenever something happened, especially, referring to family members being sick or significant changes, we made sure we gave you guys a lot of lead time.
Yes.
It'd be a case of, we're going to put our house up for sale. Just so and this is what it looks like, and this is what it means, and this is how it impacts you. And we would talk it all out.
Yeah.
So at least that way you already had something in your mind. So when the day came that we got an offer and the house was sold and we'd be moving,
We were prepped.
And it wasn't maybe because it wasn't as scary because you'd already thought it through. Same thing when Papa was sick. We talked about a lot of stuff that actually got me in trouble with my parents because they didn't want to burden their grandchildren with some of the stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
And I totally respect that. My concern was I didn't want my kids being in the dark about something and then boom, something serious happened. So I think they respected that because they understood that seemed to be what you guys needed to understand and process that information. But again, a really big change. So since then, and really, like I say, ever since that time, that's been how we've dealt with any kind of change, whether it's good or bad. I mean, let's face it, going to Disney, not bad change.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Throwing up on the way to Disney. No, that's not a good change.
Especially when I had to clean out the van, but we won't go into that. But yeah, so I think it's interesting to look at those different forms of change and people thinking, good change, bad change. What would you suggest would be a way to cope with change?
Well, it depends. Well, that's the thing, because I tend to overthink sometimes. It's only when I was talking to you about the big decision of leaving college or not, it's when you were able to get my brain to slow down. But say I'm on my own for something, and for instance, like lately, I've had a lot of friends that, maybe aren't the best to be with, and I'm kind of seeing that now. And it's hard because I'm the type of guy who, in that regard, doesn't want change. Because you're comfortable with that group of friends? Is that what you mean? More so is that, at one point, we're all happy. Right. And everyone's good. And, including people is all good. I don't mean change we're in a bubble. Change is in, this doesn't have to go sour type thing. And yet, for some random reason, and change that for no reason at all comes in, it happens, and you think, maybe it's time to move on. That type of change is hard, but the one thing I think is the most important about change is just realizing that, you decide how it goes down, kind of, or try to have some control over the situation. In some ways. Mm-hmm. You have to realize not in all the ways you won't have all the control over the change. I don't have the control to stop the change that kind of soured the friendship, but you have the control to leave it on a positive note, don't burn any bridges or try not to burn the bridge, and just leave. I love that. That actually brings up the whole thing of how we outgrow friends and relationships, whether it's romantic or platonic. And I firmly believe that there are certain people that are meant to be in your life for your whole life, and some people that are just meant to step in and then step out, and maybe they step back in again. Yep. But I don't, for some people that are I've been friends with this person since day one, and I have to be friends with them, and I have to put up with their crap and their drama and their abuse. And I don't mean just this misuse of the friendship, right? I think that's a big thing to identify that. Because you're protecting yourself too. Yeah, right? And there's a lot of people, namely that I know, where they're exactly like that. They fear change so much that no matter how sour things get, or how much they are sour behind each other's backs, they still stay together. Right. Which sounds pretty toxic. It does. And that's, as we said in the introductory episode, I'm not the type of guy to follow the sheep. I'm the type of guy to stray away and do my own thing if that will be better in the long run or short run, stuff like that. So when I see that, I just, you got to let go, which is good. But when that's a big change too. Yeah. But something I thought of when you were talking about your how long it was, the multiple years of change and people out there. The line was trying times doesn't mean it's time to start trying. Say that again? Trying times doesn't mean it's time to start trying. Huh. Because some people, when they hit change or a trying time, they haven't been trying beforehand. It's only when the trying times come in, they start trying. But the people who are more likely to come over that and succeed almost is the people who have been trying the entire time.
I see what you mean now. Okay.
So kind of how it fits in with you saying, you guys learning from telling me about change too quick or too late.
Not enough time, yeah.
You guys were preparing for that, and since you were preparing for that longer before the change happens, when the change time comes in, which could be rough, it's a lot smoother, and we come out the other side maybe a little quicker or maybe a little easier. So it's kind of like that. That's what it reminded me of. It's just a line that was in my mind, and when you said that, I thought that's a good way to sum it all up,
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think it's interesting to have this talk because I think a lot of times people will make will take drastic steps to avoid change.
Yeah.
I think they'll actually put more stress on themselves if they're concerned about a change.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways to look at it that it doesn't have to be that painful. No. And I think you're a really good example of, it could have been easier in some ways for you to just stay where you were and trudge through. It probably wouldn't have been the right thing to do.
No.
And you made your change in spite of the fact that you knew that there'd be some people who might have some pretty negative things to say about it.
Yeah.
And you really didn't care because you were committed to it. Yeah. So I think it's a good takeaway to look at change as positive and negative for sure. I think how you manage change, exactly what you said earlier, will determine whether or not, if it's negative, how impactful it'll be, and if it's positive, how beneficial it can be. So, well, that's very interesting. So yeah, we're not talking about little changes. We're not talking about we're going to move the furniture around, and
we're not talking about changing your back pocket or anything like that.
No, exactly. But you know what? In fairness, you could actually do things to create more change in your life that maybe makes you more resilient to change. So,
well, I remember when in our old house, we would change our rooms around maybe one time every 2 years or so.
Just to freshen it up.
Just to freshen up, because I feel like psychologically, and I'm not a psychologist, but psychologically, thinking of a kid whose room has never been changed throughout their entire childhood, middle school or public school, middle school, high school, and they go off to college, things like that, I think could affect them. I'm a big believer in little things affecting people psychologically, whether they know it or not.
Well, and I think that's true, and it builds up your resilience.
Yeah.
If you can be more adaptable, you don't have to be in a rut. You don't have to have that predictability. That's good, because life is not going to be predictable.
No.
If you're one of the few people who, gets through life with the minimal amount of change.
Congratulations, you did it.
Well, that can be boring too, though, right? So I don't know if it's a pro or a con, but I look at even now, there's things that are coming toward me in my life, and you think, well, is it a bad thing to get a different job? Is it a bad thing to move? Is it a bad thing to cut your hair or change your wardrobe up and wear things you don't normally wear? I think it's probably good. It helps you, certainly in my case, helps you understand yourself better, and it gives you a way to deal with bigger challenges when the time comes. So maybe that's a takeaway for our listeners that are maybe struggling with some change, to say, I know I've got to deal with some stuff and I'm just not sure how to do it. If you start with the smaller ones and see how that works for you.
And try and prepare, that's the other thing.
As much as you can.
As much as you can.
Yeah.
Take as much time as you need. And, sometimes it's a fail, success type method, like how, keep on going back to the vomit story about me at Disney. Sometimes, you kind of prepare for change, doesn't work out, but
so
you
change
it up. You change up the change.
Change up the change. We should, in all fairness, warn our listeners that there could be more than one vomit story for you.
Yeah. And with me being the vomiter, the vomitee.
And me being the cleaner up of said vomit. Well, this has been I think, a really exciting episode. I'm really thrilled that we've started off with such a strong topic.
Yeah, and we could come back to this in a couple months, maybe a year, and we'll have more topics to talk about.
And have a whole new, under change, a whole new conversation.
Because I feel for both of us, 2019 has been a pretty big year for change.
Absolutely.
Whether it be internally or externally, I think a lot of stuff might even happen before the year is over.
I agree. Doesn't it feel like that? It feels like there's you get talking to someone, you find out something that's shifted in their life, and then you find out that there's other changes and shifts going on with other people. I mean, we just came out of a federal election.
Yeah.
There's been some change there. So it does feel like there is change in the air right now. So that's interesting. I agree.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to come back maybe in 6 months and revisit this topic and see if there's anything we can add to it. But.
Yeah. Or if the people have anything to say. Like the listeners have anything to say about their experience with change.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Share with us your experiences when it comes to change and how maybe your coping tactics that we could share with other listeners. Maybe some things that you've overcome that you didn't expect to overcome. Because that's huge. And I think that goes to resiliency and self confidence as well.
Dedication a little bit.
How you deal with that change.
So where can they contact us?
Well, the best way is through email. And that is our Gmail account is chatspodcast@gmail.com. So that's chatspodcast@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. So this has been Corbin
and Sarah.
And join us for our next chats.